Hamish de Bretton-Gordon is a retired British Army colonel, former commander of UK's and NATO's chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear reaction troops. Welcome to our program, Colonel Hamish.
Thank you very much for having me.
Vladimir Putin's motorcade limousine was blown up near the FSB, Russia's secret agency headquarters near Lubyanka. A German newspaper Bild reported that this incident had caused panic in Kremlin. Could this be an assassination plot against Vladimir Putin or assassination attempt?
Well, I think there's an awful lot of rumours and counter-rumours going around about this at the moment. But it's very clear that Putin is very paranoid about his own safety at the moment. Not only this, there are also pictures on social media in the last week of actually his own bodyguards being frisked for potential weapons, really exacerbating the situation here. Now, everybody is very well aware of the sabotage that some of the Russian secret agents have been conducting across Europe in the last 12 months or so. And the head of the CIA and the head of MI6 at Christmas warned that this would be more extensive. And there have been, fires in Berlin and across Europe and even in London recently that may well be Russian sabotage. But I think this is a reminder that it's not just the Russians who get involved in this. Security agencies, intelligence agencies in the West may well be involved as well. So the fact that one of Putin's limousines, in a secure area, supposedly under the protection of the FSB, has been destroyed is, hopefully is an indication that Western intelligence agencies and Ukraine intelligence agencies are sort of not sitting on their hands. And the fact that it's rattled Putin so much hopefully will bring him to his senses and show that he must come to the ceasefire table, come to the peace negotiation table as soon as possible. But there are also other information, intelligence and rumors coming out that some of those close to Putin, some of his inner circle, are also getting frustrated with him. His special military operation is well into its third year now. The Russian economy is completely tanking and crashing with very high interest rates and very high inflation. And also we're getting reports that some of the mothers of Russia, the babushkas, are now getting incredibly angry with the amount of their sons who are being killed on the battlefield. And apparently, the Russian state is not paying compensation. And I think most people remember that it is the mothers of Russia who made Russia withdraw from Afghanistan in 1984, when they took high casualties. So I think the undercurrent in Moscow at the moment is very much going against the Kremlin and against Putin. And hopefully that will actually be a positive move and help to get the Russians to the negotiation table rather sooner rather than later. But at the moment, that is not something that we're seeing, on the world stage, as it were.
And do you see this incident as a retaliation from Western intelligence or even Ukrainian intelligence? Because last year, Russia's Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, head of chemical and biological forces, has been eliminated with a scooter, killed with a bomb. He has been eliminated with this bomb detonated in this electronic scooter. Don't you think that also Vladimir Putin and his inner circle should be afraid of their own lives, as Ukraine also conducting this assassination campaign inside Russia?
Well, I think that's a very important link. That assassination was very unexpected, and I think that really rattled the hierarchy in the Kremlin and Putin in particular. And they've certainly, after that event, upped their security. But even having done that, that the limousine was blown up as well. And we also know in the last sort of week or so, Ukraine has had some very successful strikes deep into Russia. The attack on the Engels Air Force Base, destroying 96 cruise missiles, was a very significant operation. So this is a multifaceted war at the moment, and bringing it home to Moscow, I think, from a military and security intelligence perspective, is the right thing to do, because actually it's Trump sitting behind his armored plated walls in the Kremlin. He needs to understand what is happening on the ground, and he needs, if President Trump is not going to drag him to the negotiation table, then maybe actions by Ukraine intelligence and allied intelligence will do that job as well, or better.
Also, according to The Sun, as you just mentioned, Vladimir Putin's own security officials have been checked after this incident with his limousine near the FSB headquarters. Does it mean that Vladimir Putin is also afraid of his own security guard, of his own people?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Putin appears very paranoid at the moment. There are lots of rumors that he has, what we call doppelgangers, lookalikes, to confuse anybody who might be trying to get hold of him. But when you can't trust your own personal bodyguards, that really suggests you're in a very difficult situation. Certainly, when I wrote about this in the Telegraph this week, I likened it to the Roman Forum and Brutus murdering Julius Caesar. The analogy being that Caesar would be Putin and Brutus would be some of his close associates. So, these evil tyrants are susceptible. When you do such horrific things, you are going to create enemies. And no doubt Putin has enemies close to him, and they're closing in. And he is getting incredibly worried, which is why one is seeing the actions that we've seen, particularly with his own bodyguards.
US President Donald Trump is angry with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin because Russia was delaying ceasefire talks. Could this become another turning point in Trump's stance on Vladimir Putin, in Trump's policy on Russia? Could this be this tipping point after which Trump will turn against Vladimir Putin?
Well, let's hope so. Trump used some very undiplomatic language, saying how cross he was with Putin. I think President Trump thinks that he can change every situation by doing some sort of business deal, and he's finding that actually doing business in warfare is rather different from doing business selling houses and tower blocks. And Putin is not playing ball. Trump's told him to do something, and Putin's doing exactly the opposite. Putin shows no indication at all of wanting ceasefire or peace. Putin sort of seems to think he's winning at the moment, and some of Trump's actions have made him think that. When Trump turned off the intelligence support to Ukraine and then turned off US weapons for a few weeks, that really had a profound effect, not just on the battlefield, but also led Trump to believe that actually the American president and some of his close advisors were rather closer to the Kremlin than they were to Kyiv or to London and European headquarters. Now, thankfully, Trump seems to have realized the mistakes he's been making and now putting pressure on Putin. We hear all the time about tariffs at the moment, and Trump seems to be focused on that rather than anything else. But one thing Trump did say is that if Putin didn't come to the peace negotiation table, then US or president would prevent Russian oil being sold on the world markets, which he probably can do. And if Russia can't sell its oil and gas, then it won't get its money for weapons, and that could have a really serious impact. So, with Trump putting tariffs on virtually everybody, including penguins in the Antarctic, let's hope that he will put tariffs on Russia, particularly its oil, so that it can't be sold, and Putin will run out of money more quickly than he is at the moment.
From your perspective, would it be enough to force Putin to agree with ceasefire deal? I mean, this secondary tariffs and sanctions, even tariffs against countries which are buying Russian oil?
Well, I don't think on its own it would do that, but it would certainly put more pressure on. And it's clear that there is a lot of pressure sort of coming on to the Kremlin at the moment. Although one must sort of consider that Putin still thinks he's winning. Putin knows that if he loses or doesn't achieve his aims, and his aims were the complete subjugation of the 4 oblasts that Russia controls part of at the moment, and Crimea. He also wants to decouple Europe from the US. If he doesn't achieve those, he's failed. And failed Russian dictators don't last very long. And I think Putin is well aware of that. So I think Putin is assuming he might as well fight on, because if he doesn't achieve what he's set out to do, then that's the end of him. Not only as the president, but probably the end of his life, because that's what Russians do to their failed leaders. They get rid of them completely.
And also, whoever Russia has agreed to a partial ceasefire in the air and at sea, don't you think that this is special Russia's negotiating tactics, just to give Donald Trump something to declare any kind of a victory, but not enough to actually end the war? Do you see this as Russia's negotiating tactic?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 2 ceasefires we've seen before, the 30-day ceasefire, the ink wasn't even dry on the agreement before Russia broke it. The partial ceasefire in the Black Sea really only benefited Russia, and they didn't agree to it. And at the moment, there is supposed to be an agreement that Russia and Ukraine will not attack energy infrastructure, but only overnight, last night, Russia attacked Ukraine infrastructure. So whatever comes out of Putin's mouth and his negotiators at the moment really means virtually nothing, because the Kremlin and Putin are just carrying on fighting and have made absolutely no concessions at all. So, it's Putin talks positive stuff for the media, but does absolutely nothing in the way of stopping the fighting or moving towards a ceasefire. And hopefully now President Trump is clever enough to realize that, and realize that actually it is Putin who is playing Trump and not the other way around. And hopefully Trump and his advisors learn very quickly and get a bit smarter in their dealings with the Russian president.
It is also interesting that even during negotiations, Vladimir Putin was making hostile statements toward Ukraine. He said that his army would finish off the Ukrainian army, and also he has called up another 160,000 men. This is Russia's highest number of conscripts since 2011. Don't you think that this all developments and statements, this all is just another humiliation for Donald Trump as he tries to negotiate full ceasefire?
Well, absolutely. I mean, all the things you said are not the actions of somebody who's looking for peace. The calling up of 165,000 conscripts is incredible. I personally think actually Putin has made a serious error here, because those conscripts are not going to be from the far east of Russia, the ethnic Russians that Putin has been used so far. They are going to be, the sons of the elites in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and it's going to be very difficult to, dismiss their deaths when it comes. The last time at the beginning of the war, when Putin had a big drive to recruit conscripts, thousands of young Russians fled Russia, and we will probably see the same. Also, as you mentioned, attacks continue. Putin's vowed to destroy the Ukraine military, and he's come up with some ridiculous ideas like the UN should take over control of Ukraine. So I think it is a humiliation to Trump. And I hope Trump, and one of the challenges Trump has is, people like Pete Hegseth and Witkoff and others who are put in important positions are completely inexperienced and untrained for those positions, which is why they're making such terrible errors. Now, there's not much we can do here in the UK or you can do in Ukraine to change, who runs the USA. But let's hope that they are learning quickly, and Trump realizes that actually Putin has no interest in doing some sort of deal with the White House, and the only thing that Putin recognizes is strength, and really that's what the best thing that Trump can do is to show his strong hand, his strong military hand, which is the only way that he can probably drag Putin to a negotiation table for peace and a ceasefire.
You just mentioned that Trump should use his strong military hand to force Putin to negotiating table. How do you see the military options of Donald Trump regarding Vladimir Putin? Because it seems like right now there is only economic discussion in the White House about secondary tariffs, sanctions against the Russian economy, but after the another weeks of stalemate, the discussions could also cover possible military options. How do you see these military options for Donald Trump, or even options of the last resort of Trump? Yeah.
Well, I think it's very important that the White House and Donald Trump address the terrible intelligence issue they had when the signal messaging conversation about attacking the Houthis and supporting Europe was plastered all over the media of the world. The most damaging thing about this intelligence leak is that, in effect, the White House was saying that they would not support Europe in their support of Ukraine, and that was devastating. If Putin thinks that the US will not help Europe out, then Putin might well think he can crack on and keep on fighting. It's only recently that European countries have actually suddenly realized the threat from Putin and have started to extend their military. Even the Germans now are looking to spend 200 billion euros to upgrade their military. But this is all going to take time. But European countries are now galvanized under the UK and France, and are showing a strong hand. But if Trump and the Americans also said that they would be the backstop to support Europe and Ukraine, then I think that would change the metric, change the thinking of Putin. Putin assumes at the moment that America will not get involved in any fight to save Ukraine, because that's what the Americans have said. And I think for Putin, he thinks it's a risk worth taking to keep on fighting if the Americans aren't going to get involved. So they need, ideally, they need to say, yes, we will get involved to support Europe and Ukraine if needed.
Also, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia was preparing another offensive operation inside the Sumy region to push forward in the Sumy region, Kharkiv region, and Zaporizhia region. What are the Russia's chances for a big breakthrough right now, as Ukraine still sustains forceful and also a big defensive position right now, as Ukraine fights back and also sustains this powerful defense?
Well, there are a lot of rumors that Russia is planning to attack into the Sumy region, as you said, and by putting forces there. However, a lot of these forces, Russian forces, are very poorly trained. And I personally think it will be once again the classic Russia sort of meat grinder tactics, where they just throw more and more manpower into into some sort of suicidal type assault. And as long as Ukraine has enough ammunition coming in from the West, then they should be able to hold it. I would say as well, in that area, I've been speaking to some of the people in the brigades there. The Russians are again using a lot of chemical weapons. We've discussed it before, their use of chloropicrine. I understand they're using it on a daily basis across the frontier, which is their method, their modus operandi to attack. Thankfully, I understand that there are many thousands of British gas masks, respirators, now on the way to their front line. So hopefully that'll enable the Ukraine defenders to fight better with British gas masks. But it is a concern. And the key thing is to make sure that Ukraine has the ammunition to defend against it. This is another area where Putin is probably feeling that it's worth doing this because the US are not going to come to the aid of Ukraine, which is why in our previous conversation we mentioned it is very important that the US do at least say that they will come to support, if need be, and before the European armies can get to the strength required to absolutely stop Ukraine falling to the Russians. But the summer is going to be a really telling time again, I think. But I'm confident that Ukraine has the military power and spirit to be able to resist this latest potential invasion.
Also, NATO Allied Supreme Commander General Christopher Cavoli recently testified in the Congress. He said that Ukraine has already solved its all problems with the lack of manpower. Ukraine has solved this problem. However, Russia still faces such a type of problem with manpower, with other lack of other weapons. What does this mean for this stage of the war, that Ukraine has successfully solved this problem with manpower?
Well, I mean, that's really good. And certainly when I was at the Tank Museum yesterday with General Zelensky opening the Ukraine exhibition, and there were lots of Ukraine soldiers and British soldiers there talking about the training that's going on. That was really impressive, and it appears that the training is going very well. Conversely, what Russia is not doing is training its conscripts, and an untrained conscript is pretty useless. So I think Russia seems to be unconcerned with casualties. Some figures are saying that Russia is approaching 1 million casualties, which is almost unimaginable. But a lot of it is because they're throwing untrained infantry soldiers, untrained tank soldiers into the front line who just don't know how to operate. And, unfortunately, they get it wrong and they get killed, and they get killed in their absolute thousands. Whereas, Ukrainian soldiers are getting good training, and there are now some very experienced soldiers who can pass on that experience to the newer people. So, as defenders, Ukraine is now, from a professional soldiering perspective, in a much better position than it was last year, and that is good news. But of course, what everybody wants is the fighting to stop as soon as possible.
Let's cover also our final topic, the coalition of the willing. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is pushing forward the creation of coalition of the willing. This coalition will hold another summit next week in the NATO headquarters. What is your take on the current stage of military planning, which is going on in Europe right now?
I think the military planning is now pretty advanced, and certainly speaking to some of the British military planners, an awful lot of work has gone on, a lot of progress has been made, lots of training is happening, some of it combined training, some of it individual training. So the message coming out, and the message that should be heard in Moscow, is Europe is really serious about this. They have plans. They think that they have the right force structures and the right force to create what they're calling a peace enforcement force. This is one that has sufficient firepower to be able to deter and push Russians back if they do transgress. There's a lot of work going on providing a sort of air defense cover from European NATO air forces of around 140 fighter jets, and I gather that is well advanced. So, I think Europe countries led by Britain and France are taking this very, very seriously. They're committing a lot of resources, and they are planning to have to use this force if necessary. This is not some sort of hollow threat. This is not just politicians speaking, for effect. And hopefully the Kremlin realize this and take it seriously, because I don't think European NATO countries are going to slow down at all. They are accelerating their efforts. And if there is some sort of ceasefire soon, it would appear that European NATO countries, the coalition of the willing, is ready, willing and able to put a significant force into Ukraine to make sure that peace is held.
Thank you, Colonel Hamish, for your time and for your support for Ukraine and glory.